While I was on vacation, my mom sold my house to pay off my sister's $214,000 debts. When I came back, they mocked me. Now you're homeless. I just smiled. What's so funny? They snapped, irritated. I replied that the house they sold wasn't mine anymore. Hi, I'm Benjamin Carter, 32 years old, and I've spent the last decade being the family problem solver. My younger sister Natalie is 28, perpetually broke, and somehow convinced that being irresponsible is a personality trait. She's had 6 jobs in 3 years, leased cars she couldn't afford, racked up credit card debt buying designer clothes for Instagram, and crashed twice on my couch when landlords kicked her out. Meanwhile, I worked my way up from showing cramped studio apartments to closing million-dollar deals as a licensed real estate agent in Seattle. I paid off my student loans at 26, bought my first investment property at 28, and helped mom and dad refinance their mortgage when dad's roofing business slowed down. Mom calls me her rock. Dad says I'm the responsible one. Natalie calls me boring and says I need to loosen up. I didn't think much of it, honestly. That's just how our family worked. I fixed things, Natalie created problems, and my parents pretended everything was fine. Last April, I finally did something for myself. I booked a week-long vacation to Maui, my first real break in 7 years. No client calls, no family emergencies, just me, the ocean, and a paperback thriller I'd been meaning to read since Christmas. My boss practically forced me to go after I skipped 3 vacations in a row to close deals. She told me I was 32, not 62, and that I needed to take the damn vacation. So I did. I rented a beachfront condo in Kihei, packed light, and made one decision that felt revolutionary. I turned off my phone. Not silent. Off. I told my parents I'd check in midweek, told my assistant to handle anything urgent, and for the first time in years, I just existed. I woke up to sunrises, ate fresh poke bowls, went snorkeling, and fell asleep to the sound of waves. It felt like breathing after holding your breath underwater. I remember thinking on day 4, lying on a beach towel with salt drying on my skin, that this was what life should feel like. I wasn't checking emails, wasn't solving anyone's crisis, wasn't the family ATM. I was just Benjamin, drinking a cold beer and watching the sunset turn the sky pink and orange. On the last day, I turned my phone back on. It took a full minute to load, and when it did, my stomach dropped. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, 12 voicemails. Most were from mom, a few from dad, and surprisingly, 3 from Natalie. My heart started pounding because in my family, that many messages meant someone died or the house burned down. I opened the texts first. Mom's messages escalated from asking me to call when I could to saying it was urgent to demanding I call right now. Natalie's were blunt, saying I was going to be pissed, but whatever, and that mom did what she had to do. Dad's voicemails were stiff and uncomfortable, like he was reading from a script, saying mom made a decision and it was complicated. I sat on the condo balcony, still in my swim trunks, and listened to the final voicemail from mom. Her voice was shaky but defiant. She said she knew I'd be upset, but Natalie was in real trouble. The creditors were threatening legal action, and Natalie was going to lose everything. They didn't have a choice. They sold my house to pay off her debts. It was done. The closing happened yesterday. She was sorry I had to find out this way, but I wasn't answering, and they couldn't wait. I played it twice to make sure I heard correctly. Sold my house. To pay off Natalie's debts. My house. The 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow I bought 4 years ago in the Fremont neighborhood. The one I renovated myself on weekends. The one with the garden I planted and the porch where I drank coffee every Sunday morning. They sold it. Without asking. Without telling me until it was already done. I felt cold despite the 80-degree heat. My hands were shaking, not from anger yet, but from sheer disbelief. I called mom back immediately. She answered on the first ring, relief flooding her voice, saying thank God and that she was so worried. I interrupted her and asked what the hell she was talking about, that she sold my house. She sighed like I was being difficult and explained that Natalie owed $214,000 from credit cards, personal loans, and that car lease she defaulted on. They were going to sue her, garnish her wages, ruin her credit forever. They had to help. I repeated that she sold my house, louder this time, asking how that was even possible since it wasn't hers to sell. Mom hesitated, and I heard Dad murmuring something in the background. Then she explained that I'd given her power of attorney last year when I was closing that deal in California, and technically, the deed had both our names from when she co-signed my original mortgage. My blood went cold. She was right. When I bought the house at 28, I was still building credit, so Mom co-signed as a favor. I'd been meaning to refinance and remove her name once my credit improved, but I got busy and it slipped through the cracks. And yes, I'd given her limited power of attorney last year when I was stuck in LA for a 3-week closing and needed someone to sign paperwork on a rental property I was buying. I never imagined she'd use it like this. I tried to stay calm and told her that power of attorney was for one specific transaction, and that co-signing didn't give her the right to sell my house without my consent. That was fraud. That was illegal. Mom snapped back, her tone shifting from apologetic to defensive, telling me not to be dramatic. They did what they had to do to save my sister. I'd always been the strong one. I'd bounce back. Natalie wouldn't survive this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked if I was supposed to lose my home because Natalie couldn't stop buying $1,000 handbags. Mom said coldly that it was done. The buyer already moved in. The money was transferred to pay off Natalie's creditors. I could stay with them until I figured things out. They'd make it work. I hung up. I didn't yell, didn't argue further. I just ended the call and sat there staring at the ocean, my mind racing. They sold my house, my home, the place I'd built my life in. And they acted like I should just accept it, like I was some bottomless well of resources they could dip into whenever Natalie screwed up again. I felt a lot of things in that moment. Anger, betrayal, shock, but underneath it all was something colder. Clarity, because they didn't know something. Something I'd set up 6 months ago after Natalie tried to guilt me into co-signing a loan for a business idea that was obviously a scam. I'd gotten smart. I'd protected myself. And the house they sold? It wasn't actually mine. Not legally. Not anymore. I booked the first flight back to Seattle, barely slept on the red-eye, and landed at SeaTac at 6 in the morning. I didn't go home. Well, to the house that used to be mine. I went straight to a coffee shop near my office, ordered a black coffee, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the documents I needed, the ones I'd filed 6 months ago with my real estate attorney, a sharp woman named Shay Donovan who specialized in asset protection. Back in October, after Natalie's loan stunt, I'd gotten paranoid. I loved my family, but I wasn't stupid. So I did what any smart real estate agent would do. I transferred ownership of my house into an LLC. Willow Pine Holdings, LLC. A single-member limited liability company with me as the sole owner and manager. The property deed was no longer in my name or my mom's. It was owned by the LLC, which meant Mom's co-signature on the old mortgage was irrelevant, and her power of attorney meant absolutely nothing. She couldn't sell what she didn't legally own. I sat there in that coffee shop, staring at the LLC documents, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: control. They thought they'd back me into a corner, thought I'd just roll over and accept being homeless because family comes first. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. I took a long sip of coffee, closed my laptop, and smiled. Not a happy smile. A cold, calculated one. Because I wasn't going to yell or beg or guilt-trip them. I was going to do something much worse. I was going to let them think they'd won. And then I was going to show them exactly what happens when you steal from someone who actually knows the law. I drove to the house around noon. My house. Or rather, the house they thought they'd sold. It was a sunny Saturday, and as I pulled up to the curb, I saw 3 people standing on the front porch: Mom, Natalie, and a middle-aged guy in khakis and a polo shirt holding a folder. The new owner, I assumed. Mom looked nervous when she saw my car, but Natalie had this smug little smirk on her face like she'd just won the lottery. I parked, got out, and walked up the driveway slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Mom stepped forward with her hands clasped, saying she didn't expect me back so soon. I told her that finding out your family sold your house tends to ruin a vacation. The guy in khakis looked uncomfortable and introduced himself as Derek Chun, explaining he bought this property 3 days ago. The sale was finalized, and he had the signed deed. He held up the folder like it was a shield. I glanced at it, then back at Mom, asking if she'd signed the deed. She said defensively that she had power of attorney and was on the original mortgage, so it was legal. Their lawyer confirmed it. I raised an eyebrow and asked if she meant the guy Dad uses for his business contracts, the one who does commercial roofing disputes. Mom's face flushed, and she admitted he'd said it was fine. Natalie crossed her arms and leaned against the porch railing, telling me to stop being so dramatic. I'd get another house. I was a real estate agent, for crying out loud. Meanwhile, she was drowning in debt, and Mom saved her life. I should show some gratitude. I stared at her for a long moment. I could see Dad's roofing truck parked down the street, meaning he was probably hiding inside the house, too scared to face me. Classic. I asked Natalie slowly if she wanted me to be grateful that she racked up $214,000 in debt buying crap she didn't need. and Mom decided the solution was to steal my house. Mom snapped that they didn't steal it. They sold it legally to pay off my sister's debts. I would have done the same thing if I wasn't so selfish. Derek Chin cleared his throat, saying he didn't want to get in the middle of a family thing, but he paid $380,000 for this house. The sale was done. He had the deed, the title, everything. He was sorry if there was confusion, but legally, this was his property now. I finally looked at him, and I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. I asked if he'd hired a title company to process this sale. He said of course he had. He wasn't an idiot. He used First National Title. They did the full title search, confirmed ownership, everything checked out. I asked him who they said owned the property. Derek hesitated, glancing at Mom, then explained the deed showed Benjamin Carter and Linda Carter as co-owners. Linda signed on my behalf using power of attorney. It was all verified. I nodded slowly, then pulled out my phone and told him that deed, the one showing me and my mom as co-owners, was 4 years old. It was outdated. 6 months ago, I transferred ownership of this property into a limited liability company called Willow Pine Holdings, LLC. The current legal owner of this house wasn't me. It wasn't my mom. It was the LLC, which meant the deed he signed was worthless. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek's face went pale, asking what I meant. Mom's voice rose, saying I couldn't just transfer ownership without telling anyone. I replied calmly that actually, I could. It was called asset protection. I filed the transfer with the county recorder's office 6 months ago. It was public record. If Mr. Chin's title company had done their job properly, they would have caught it. But they didn't, which meant this sale was invalid. Mr. Chin didn't own this house. Willow Pine Holdings did. And I was the sole member of that LLC. Derek looked like he might pass out, saying he paid my mother $380,000. I told him, not unkindly, that he was going to need to get that money back because the person who sold him this house didn't have the legal authority to do so. I suggested he contact his title company immediately and start the process of unwinding this sale. He might also want to talk to a lawyer. Natalie's smug expression had completely disappeared. She asked if this meant the sale didn't count. I said nope, popping the P for emphasis. It didn't count. Because you can't sell what you don't own. Mom's face turned red, calling this ridiculous and asking if I was going to let my sister lose everything over a technicality. I repeated the word back at her, my voice finally rising. This wasn't a technicality. She committed fraud. She sold property she didn't own using power of attorney she didn't have the right to use. If Mr. Chin wanted to, he could sue her for every penny he gave her. And he'd win. Derek Chun was already on his phone, frantically dialing, saying he needed to speak to his lawyer now. He walked off toward his car, shouting into his phone about title insurance and legal action. Natalie looked at Mom, panic creeping into her voice, asking what this meant. If the sale didn't count, did she have to pay the money back? Mom didn't answer. She just stared at me like I'd betrayed her, saying I couldn't do this. Natalie would be sued. She'd lose everything. I said coldly that she already lost everything. That's why we were in this mess. And now they dragged an innocent buyer into their scheme, and they'd committed fraud. Congratulations. Natalie shouted that this was my fault. If I'd just helped her in the first place, none of this would have happened. I laughed. Actually laughed. I told Natalie I'd been helping her my entire adult life. I co-signed her first apartment lease. I paid her car insurance when she was unemployed. I lent her $5,000 for that business idea she never paid back. I'd been her safety net for a decade, and this was how she repaid me, by letting Mom sell my house. Natalie yelled that they didn't think I'd care this much. It was just a house. I roared back that it was my house, and both of them flinched. I took a breath, forced myself to calm down, and told them what was going to happen. I was going to contact my attorney. She was going to send them both a cease and desist letter. If they tried to contest the LLC transfer, if they tried to claim any ownership of this property, I would bury them in legal fees. And Mr. Chun was going to sue them for fraud, and he was going to win, because they sold him property they didn't own. So whatever money they used to pay off Natalie's debts, they better hope they could get it back, because they were going to need it. Mom's eyes filled with tears, saying we were family. I said quietly that family doesn't steal from each other. And they weren't sorry they did it. They were sorry they got caught. I turned and walked back to my car. Behind me, I heard Natalie shouting something, and Mom was crying, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, but underneath all of it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. I went straight to Shay Donovan's office. She was in on a Saturday because real estate attorneys in Seattle don't really get weekends off. I laid out everything. Mom's fraudulent sale, Derek Chin's invalid deed, Natalie's debts, all of it. Shay listened, made notes, and when I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. She said this was the cleanest case of attempted title fraud she'd ever seen. My mom didn't have a leg to stand on. The LLC transfer was rock solid. We'd file a quiet title action to officially confirm Willow Pine Holdings as the rightful owner, send a demand letter to my mother and the buyer, and within 30 days, this whole mess would be resolved. I asked what would happen to the buyer. Shay explained he'd get his money back through title insurance. That's what title insurance was for, situations exactly like this. He'd be made whole, and his insurance company would go after my mom to recover the funds. She was the one who was going to be on the hook. I nodded slowly and said good. Shay's tone softened, and she asked if I was okay. This was my family, after all. That had to be hard. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. I told her I thought it would be, but honestly, I felt lighter than I had in years. Over the next 2 weeks, everything unfolded exactly as Shay predicted. Derek Chin's title insurance company confirmed the sale was invalid and refunded his $380,000. They then filed a claim against Mom to recover the funds, but since she'd already transferred the money to Natalie's creditors, she didn't have it. The insurance company threatened legal action, and Dad had to take out a second mortgage on their house to pay it back. Natalie's creditors, meanwhile, were informed that the payments were being reversed and her debts were reinstated. She was right back where she started, except now she'd burned every bridge with me. Mom called me 17 times in those 2 weeks. I didn't answer. Natalie sent texts ranging from apologetic to furious. I blocked her number. Dad finally showed up at my office, looking exhausted and ashamed. He said quietly that my mother was a wreck and she didn't mean for it to go this way. I said flatly that she meant to steal my house. The only thing she didn't mean was to get caught. Dad asked if we could work this out, saying we were family. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who taught me how to throw a baseball and change a tire, and I felt nothing. No anger, no love, just indifference. I told him he stood by and let her do it. He didn't call me, didn't warn me, didn't stop her. He was just as guilty. He left without another word. And that was it. The legal battle was over. The house was officially, irrevocably mine again. And my family. They were strangers now. You'd think that would be the end of it. But with my family, nothing is ever that simple. Over the next month, the calls kept coming. Not from Mom or Natalie. They'd finally gotten the message, but from aunts, uncles, cousins, people I barely talked to suddenly very concerned about family unity. My Aunt Carol called me at work one afternoon, her voice dripping with passive-aggressive sympathy, saying my mother was devastated and only wanted to help Natalie. Didn't I think I was being a little harsh? I told her Mom committed fraud, and if I'd done that to a client, I'd lose my license and go to jail. Carol insisted that family forgives. I said family also doesn't steal from each other, and hung up. My Uncle Ron tried the guilt trip approach, saying Dad's health wasn't great and all this stress. Did I want that on my conscience? I didn't even respond to that one. The thing is, they didn't actually care about me. They cared about the fact that I wasn't playing my role anymore. The reliable son, the family ATM, the guy who fixed everyone's problems while his own life fell apart. And now that I'd stepped out of that role, they didn't know what to do with me. 8 weeks after I got back from Maui, Mom sent me a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter delivered to my office. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. It was 3 pages long, and she apologized, sort of. She said she never meant to hurt me and only wanted to save Natalie. She hoped we could move past this as a family. And then, in the final paragraph, she got to the real point. She said they were struggling financially because of the legal fees and the second mortgage. Natalie still owed money, and the creditors were threatening her again. I was the only one who could help. If I could just lend them $50,000, they could get back on their feet. She promised they'd pay me back. I read it twice. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I laughed. Out loud. Alone in my office. I laughed until my stomach hurt. Because after everything, after the fraud, the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for my life, she was asking me for money. Again, that's all I'd ever been to them. A resource. A solution. A wallet with a heartbeat. I didn't respond to the letter. I just filed it away with all the other legal documents from this mess. 2 months later, my parents made one last attempt. They invited me to Sunday dinner, and part of me, maybe the stupid, hopeful part, wanted to believe they'd finally realized what they'd done. So I went. Big mistake. Mom was overly cheerful, Dad was stiff and awkward, and Natalie sat at the table with her arms crossed like a teenager forced to attend family therapy. For 20 minutes, it was painfully polite small talk. Then, halfway through the meal, Mom cleared her throat and said they'd come up with a plan. Natalie was going to move in with them to save money, and since I had that big house all to myself, maybe I could take out a home equity line of credit to help them cover some expenses. Just temporarily, of course. I said no. Just that. No explanation, no discussion. Just no. Dad's voice turned sharp, saying I owed them. I stood up and said I didn't owe them anything. I'd spent the last decade bailing this family out of every crisis, and the one time I set a boundary, they called me selfish. They sold my house. They committed fraud. They didn't apologize. They asked for more money. So no, I didn't owe them a damn thing. Natalie called me a selfish asshole. I told her she was a leech who'd been sucking this family dry for years, and the second someone said no, she threw a tantrum. Mom started crying, asking how I could say that about my sister. I said she was a 30-year-old woman who'd never taken responsibility for her life, and Mom had enabled her every step of the way. They wanted to help her? Fine, but leave me out of it. As I walked toward the door, Mom followed me and said if I walked out, don't come back. I stopped, turned, and said good. Because I wasn't planning to. I left, got in my car, drove away, and never looked back. And I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. It's been 6 months since that dinner. I haven't spoken to my parents or Natalie since. I blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, and moved on with my life. I heard through the grapevine that Natalie declared bankruptcy and is living with my parents rent-free. Mom and Dad are struggling with the second mortgage but refuse to downsize. They still think I'm the villain in this story. Maybe I am. I don't really care. Because I'm happy now. Genuinely, actually happy. I sold one of my investment properties and bought a bigger house in Ballard, a beautiful craftsman with a view of the Sound. I wake up every morning, make coffee, and sit on my porch watching the sunrise. I don't check my phone for crisis messages. I don't worry about whose problem I'm going to solve today. I just live. I started dating someone, joined a hiking group, and even took a weekend trip to Portland just because I felt like it. Little things, normal things, things I never had time for when I was busy being everyone's emergency contact. And I don't miss them. My family, I mean. I thought I would. Thought there'd be this gaping hole where they used to be, but there isn't. There's just peace. Last week, I got an email from Mom saying Dad had a minor heart attack last month. He was okay now, but it was a scare. She wanted me to know in case something happened. She wasn't asking me to come back, just asking me to think about it. I read it twice, waiting for the guilt to hit, for the old instinct to kick in and make me rush to their side. But it didn't come. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a distant acknowledgement that this was their life, not mine. I didn't respond. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe it makes me a bad son. I don't know. What I do know is this. I love my family. I don't pay their bills. If that makes me the villain, fine. I've got a life to live. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.